as we go along. So week number 1, I talked about this a little bit. The biggest change is that in the removed video, this is the question that's on the slide, but this is where you can ask some or all of these questions. So you can talk about the differences of Kira being Black and Zoe being white and how that might impact their relationship, how might that impact the relationship with the larger extended family, how could Kira support Zoe, what would happen if things were reversed, right? So if Kira were white and Zoe were Black, what issues might come up? How could Kira support Zoe in case she experiences any racism, or helping her to be able to join with their family effectively? And then, you know, asking some other questions about, throwing some other questions out there about physical disability or religious differences, those kinds of things. So this is an opportunity for you to enhance the conversation in the way that makes sense for you. This was a Mr. Rogers slide, so I just switched this slide. It's not very clear here, but it's more clear, the one that you have. So those are the only things in week 1. Week 2, oh, the Tronic still face experiment. So the video is still there, but it's a different version of the video. If you remember, the video that's that we have is of all white moms. This is a video that uses dads, and some of the dads are of color, so it helps, you know, kind of shift that both a racial stereotype, but also that dads can provide really good attunement with kids also. So that's the other shift in week 2. Week 3, oh, so week 3 is the story of Betty and Janice. So I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see you for a minute. So Betty and Janice, remember, that's the story where there's an African-American woman and her foster daughter, and the daughter is caught having sex in the closet with some boys, and the foster mother struggles with that. So I've gone back and forth on this. So some of you, so bear with me. So initially, I received some feedback that was helpful, that especially here in Vermont, where the majority of population is white, that story seemed to enhance some negative stereotypes about African-American people. So then we removed reference to race at all. So there's no reference to her race at all. But when you do that, people assume folks are white, right? There's an automatic assumption. If there's no race, then they must be white. So we did make that change, and I know some of you taught it that way. However, what's happened is we have tons of printed manuals that are out there in the world that say that these characters in the story are African-American. And so we made the decision to leave them as African-American, but then acknowledge that piece, you know, acknowledge, so how might racial differences play out in this story? So that's what's printed out there. Maybe someday when we get rid of all of our manuals, we can make that change, but it feels important to acknowledge race in this story, and then also to use that as a talking point. So use that to talk about things like, let me just, some of the conversations afterward. So what might be different if they were both white? Or what might be different if one of them was Black and one of them was white? What might be different if Janice had a developmental disability? What might have been different if Janice went in the closet and had sex with girls instead of with boys? Would there have been a different reaction to that? How would they have dealt with that? So it's a time to open up some of those conversations. So looking at those different pieces in that conversation. Thoughts or questions? Great. So that's week 3. That's the biggest change there. This is just, oops, talking through those. Right, so Betty and Janice is week 3. Week 4, the changes are, oh, so I removed the ukulele video. I know we all loved that video very much, but, you know, everyone's white in that video. So there's a new video I'm going to show you right now. Sometimes if you can you see this, folks? Someone say yes or no.
No.
We can't.
You can't.
I think you're just sharing the PowerPoint instead of your screen number 1.
Okay. How about now? No.
Yes.
We can see it,
Yes.
but I don't think it's the video.
Well, it's an ad. Hold
Yep.
on.
Times you need to get away from the kids for
The ad
grown-up
will be over in a
time.
second.
Or get away from the grown-ups for kid time.
Okay. They need to work on that, right? Yes, okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Huh? Oh, no, not this one. This is the grand finale of this. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't bring that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't bring it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? But don't do that here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
Whoops, it's still playing. Hold on.
I love that video.
So just another way of showing the same thing, right? How can a parent and a child connect in a tune, right? Another beautiful example.
That baby was so expressive. Like, where is that little baby? It's so cute.
I saw an interview of this dad and he just went on and on about this kid. And again, he started to take some other videos of the two of them and he didn't plan, he just like, it just happened. So it was really cool. So, you know, there's one of the shifts that can help, you know, broaden our range. Okay, let me jump back to the PowerPoint. So there's that piece. So that's in week 4. Change some, week 4 also has a bunch of some different slides of just pictures of people doing things together. So I made some changes in some of those slides. Week 5, there are no changes. Week 6, this is a minor change. There was a similar slide about responding and reacting, and it was the characters were white in that. So it's the content's similar, but it's just different. Again, little changes. I put a Tasmanian devil down here. Week 7. Oh, there's a point in week 7 where they're talking about how to give a safety message for your child and how to support your child through some of this. So I've just added this other piece to it. So just to broaden that conversation. And then we're into week 8. So week 8, this is just a brief outline. So I provide this extra outline for you about what happens in this week. So you're still doing some of the regular activities, the check-in, the mindfulness, the taking stock activity. That's the one where people put the candy in the cups. I moved that to the beginning of that week. So that's how that week opens up. Then we do the iceberg activity and some of these other things that lead into the new curriculum. So let me just go through that. So check-in question, mindfulness activity, taking stock, so doing the candy activity here, that's all the same. Discussion is the same. Then we get to the iceberg piece, and the highlighted part and culture is the piece that's added here. So this is, you would enhance this conversation a little bit more when you get to the iceberg piece. So, sorry, just I'm trying to find my right note here. So this is where you can talk about how not only do our child's feelings, thoughts, and expectations, stuff from the invisible suitcase, not only are they underlying what's happening, so too are their, is their culture, all the things that make them who they are based on their culture. Those pieces are also underlying the surface. This part is the same. This is where you do that what if activity and you get into the cognitive triangle. So we're talking about this piece. This is all the same. Okay. So after you do those two activities, then we shift into this part where this is the bigger focus about intercultural responsiveness. So one way to transition to this piece of the activity is to talk about what are some other ways that impact our children's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, because that's what we've just done with the cognitive triangle. I would talk a little bit about a trauma lens. We've already talked about that. So here's yet another way to look at our children and understand our children and meet them on their level, is to look at some intercultural responsiveness. But what does this term mean? So we're going to talk about that. So wait, let me just go back for a second. We talk about the term intercultural responsiveness. There's guidelines in the slides for you, but what does inter mean? Inter means between. Cultural, we talk about what culture means, and then responsiveness is that whole idea of being thoughtful and deliberate, not reactive. So just taking this, these two words apart a little bit for folks. Making sure that this conversation isn't just this conversation about all the bad things about racism or homophobia or ableism, that there's beauty in the diversity of people. So making sure that you're also emphasizing that piece. Talking about what we mean by intercultural responsiveness. So go ahead and take a minute to read this, but this is what we would talk about with the class at this point. So this could be a moment that would be really helpful if you felt comfortable to do a little bit of self-disclosure around how you have maybe grappled with understanding differences, or how you've grown and changed, or what kind of self-reflection you've had in yourself. This could be a really valuable moment to do that. So this is the culture wheel that was referred to earlier. So at this point, you would show this culture wheel. And again, I have very detailed instructions on how to teach this part, but essentially what you would do is talk through this culture wheel. So I'm going to do a very abbreviated version of that, but essentially all of us have these various different aspects, dimensions of our diversity that impact us. So there's our personality, that part of us that we were born with. Some of us are more naturally quiet or loud or musical or athletic. There's that piece that just comes with us. And then there are all these other aspects. So whether we have an ability or an ability that's a disability that's visible or not visible, or we don't have a disability, what our sexual identity is, how we, what our economic class as a child was, so how that impacted us, our religion as a child, our age. You know, in society, there's all kinds of discrimination or favoritism based on people and their age. Race, ethnicity, gender identity. So we talk through those. Then there's the outer wheel that are things people might not think of in quite the same way. So someone's parental status, often that can be a big deal. If some people can feel excluded if they aren't a parent of children, and that can impact them. Where people grow up, their work background, education. So we talk through this piece. So the first part is explaining each of this, and obviously you could spend 2 hours on this. That's not the goal. The goal is to kind of do a brief review of what these pieces are. There's lots of detailed information in the handbook for folks to read about, and we are going to dive into some of those a little bit more. So after you've gone over that and had people kind of grasp what this is, you ask folks, the activity is to ask folks to pick 2 or 3 of these pie pieces that they most identify with. So pick 2 or 3 of those pie pieces, and to think about how those things have impacted them over the course of their life. And then how did other people's perception of them with that piece of the pie impact them growing up? So this is a time that really is focused on the class participants to be thinking about themselves. You know, one of the things that happens here in White Vermont is that many White Vermonters don't think of themselves as having any kind of cultural identity. We're the default, is kind of the belief. So this can really get people to start think about some of the stuff, and hopefully lessen their defensiveness to like, oh yeah, right, I have this religion, or I grew up poor and now I have money, or what, you know, whatever those pieces are. So spend some time with that. And you can do that in small groups or large group discussion or breakout rooms, however you want to do that piece. And then, whoops, it's the same slide for the second one. And now we shifted a little bit to think about their children, the children in their care. So in this piece, you ask them to make a guess, a best guess about 2 or 3 of the pie pieces that might be most significant for the child in their care. What gifts or challenges does that piece of the pie bring for the child in their care? And then how does this piece of the pie impact how the world sees their child? So then you would lead a conversation and a discussion about that piece. It's going to pause. Questions, thoughts, comments about that part? Is that making sense? Okay. Okay. Go back. So we're still in week 8. Now we talk about, hey, so we're going to take those pie pieces and we're going to focus on these 3 pieces. And you say the same thing I did, that not that, you know, these pieces are more important, but they certainly can be pretty significant in the lives of the children that we care for. So then for each one, so we do race first, there's a slide that gives some statistics. So to bring it home a little bit around the reality of the child that might be in their care. I'll just give you a second to read this. So then we watch a video. So we're going to watch this video now, if I can figure out how to do it properly. Stop sharing. Oh, I thought this was going to be easy. Can you see this black screen?
Yes.
Great.
I'm from Haiti and Nigeria. Like 3 things, like I'm Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Black. I'm biracial. I have an African-American father and an Irish-American mom.
My name's Lamine. I'm Muslim.
I'm Indian, British, Scottish, and American.
My parents are from Venezuela, and I was sharing like one of the foods that we eat, and then I got made fun of. They were like, "What is that? Ew. Oh, ew. What is that?" And like I cried because I felt like, oh, there's something wrong where I'm from. Like maybe like it's bad. Like I'm different.
I am an African-American adopted girl, only child, and I live with my 2 dads.
I remember when I was younger, I went with my family to a restaurant, and they made us pay in advance just in case we didn't pay afterwards, and that was kind of upsetting.
You start to notice that people are different, and you have comments, they might be racist or they might not be, but by the time you get older, you know that it is racist and you should stop.
I feel a little scared about if I, just walk down the street, cops might just think I'm doing something bad, and then if I try to explain to them, they won't listen and then just start beating me up and doing terrible things to me.
I think there's like this anxiety that kind of comes with being biracial, like that kind of eats away at you, like almost like you have to prove yourself like that you're one or the other. Like, for example, like I hear the phrase, you're not black all the time.
People sometimes think that I'm supposed to like talk ghetto or like whatever that is.
Oh, she's uneducated because she's African American.
Because I'm Hispanic or Latino, I can't have like a lot of money.
Just this weekend, I went with my friend to Urban Outfitters and we were shopping and I really wanted to try on this dress. And then this lady that was just like there, she was kind of like watching me. And I'm just like, I'm not gonna steal it or anything.
I think white privilege is the idea that in your everyday life you're getting treated differently and sometimes with more respect, or people just trust you more, or they have certain expectations of you, like you might be smarter or you might be wealthier because you're white. It makes me feel guilty sometimes, even though it's not my fault. Like I feel guilty for having a privilege that like I don't deserve.
If I was ever like the mayor or something that controls the policemen, I would want to go out and look in the neighborhoods where there are people that's very friendly so you can pick them instead of like these guys that's just doing all this training. It's better to pick people that's more minded with the community than to just pick some new guy and get on the street. Like it's just not gonna work out.
We have like these kids from, they're Ecuadorian, and they get made fun of because they look Mexican, and they get told on a daily basis, oh, you like tacos? Oh, you like churros? How come I saw your mom on the corner selling ices? Like it's, like I feel bad for them personally, because I'm like, wow, like they're not, and like even though they tell them I'm not Mexican, I'm Ecuadorian, they still get teased.
So that video hopefully will kind of set a stage to continue the conversation. Has anyone seen that video before? Some yeses, some no's. Okay, great.
It makes me think of the parent that Monica was talking about earlier.
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, something powerful of just kids talking about race and experiences sometimes speaks
Right.
in a different way than us or articles do.
Right, it could be enlightening for her. So after that, then we switch to LGBTQ. And again, here's a Vermont relative statistic. You know, so if nothing else, that's, you know, if folks have their own homophobia or transphobia, seeing that statistic hopefully will make them realize, hey, I've got to support this child in my home, this youth in my home.
Amy, I have a question.
Yes.
Cisgender, like that, I think there's some terms that maybe we shouldn't assume that people know. In this section, do you have a sort of a vocabulary, like?
Oh, you just hold on, Sharon. It's going to come up in this
will.
video. So it's
Okay.
in this video, and the book has a lot of, the manual that they get has all kinds of
Nice.
information in it. All right, perfect segue to my video. Hold on.
Amy, do you know if there are any sort of, if there's training and or sort of like questions around sort of homophobia and transphobia for folks who are becoming adoptive parents, like within the process through DCF or outside of that?
Jennifer,
thinking about, yeah.
would our trainings apply for that?
Yeah, I mean, we have an LGBTQ plus 101 training, which we partnered with Outright to develop, and they did the filming of different community members, youth voice, and professionals. It's an advanced offering for caregivers as they move through foundations, sexual identity, gender identity is touched on, as well as other facets of a child or youth's kind of who they are and where they come from. And it's just I feel like, our foundations is so much, right? So like, it's just like, I don't want to say surface, but it is foundational that should be built on where they take the advanced training. I do know that the application to be a foster parent was updated recently, and they actually ask some provocative, targeted questions around that as well as race, so that the individual that's licensing or doing the home visit and working with the family is able to have hopefully some hard, important conversations with them to determine kind of where they are and their ability to care. Does that mean that people could know how they're supposed to answer some of those questions as opposed to being honest? Yes, but there is at least some attention being paid to doing that in the application and licensing process.
Just to clarify the advanced training, so any foster parent who completes the foundational training, which is the required training to become a licensed foster parent in Vermont, they're eligible to take that advanced training. It's an online 2 hour. How long is it? Do you know, Jennifer?
I'll look it up right now and I'll put it in the chat, but really anyone could take it. It's, anyone can, I'll put the website link in our chat feature, and anyone can create a user account and can go to the Kin Foster Adoptive Caregiver section and select LGBTQ+ 101 and could take that, because even though it's through the realm or the lens of being a caregiver, it really is any individual that's working with caregiving in a variety of roles, right? So I think it could be useful for many folks. And I know we've had people outside of foster parents take that.
Great. So Jennifer will put that link in the chat box. Thank you. So let me play this video, next video.
My son told me he kept who he was a secret for years. I wish I had known what he wanted to say.
A student told me at a pretty young age that they didn't want to be referred to as either he or she. I had to practice using different words for them.
When she was a young adult and told me that she had feelings for another girl, she said she always knew this, but was afraid to talk about it. I love her so much.
At first, she was holding hands with her friend because that's what young girls do. Then she was bullied for it, and I didn't understand what was happening. I wish I'd known more.
These are the voices of adults who care about young people who identify as LGBTQ. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer questioning. Youth who identify as any of these orientations or statuses are at significantly increased risk for mental health problems, bullying and other violence, homelessness, substance use disorder, and even suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Because of the vulnerability of LGBTQ youth, it's critical for adults to be mindful of ways to better listen to the voices of these young people. Keep a few simple ideas in mind. Developmental stages. Friendships form in childhood, and romantic attractions in others can begin in adolescence. For adolescents, a desire for friendship or a closer connection with another person is normal. Pay attention to how and when the young people in your life express their romantic attention to others. How they want to express themselves at this point in their lives may include their identity as LGBTQ. Cultural influences. People receive messages from friends, family, their communities, and the media about what is acceptable. Negative messages about LGBTQ identity can be a significant reason that talking about their personal lives can be so hard. Being open to who they are and who they want to be can be the most difficult experience of their young lives. Identity and pronouns. LGBTQ youth may choose their own pronouns because of their feelings about the intersection between culture and gender. Many have chosen to use non-gendered pronouns such as they or their in order to avoid using gender identifiers, she, her, or he, him. Their choices should be respected and practiced by others, as it is a language shift that is important to a young person. LGBTQ youth will often discuss how their biological influences affect who they are attracted to and how they want to live their lives. These influences impact decisions about friendships, partners, social circles, clothes, and where and how they want to live their lives as adults. All of these factors are dealt with carefully and cautiously. Biology plays an important role for a person who may identify as LGBTQ. Parents, teachers, coaches, clergy, community leaders, and other adults have the opportunity to listen to LGBTQ youth. Children and adolescents often express themselves according to the expectations of their home communities and cultures. The hope for all is supportive, caring, non-judgmental environment. LGBTQ youth who are at increased risk for mental health and other problems can be offered confidence, safety, and security in who they are and how they express themselves by a trusted adult who is willing to listen to them. True listening means there is always help, and there is always hope.
So obviously that goes into some of the terminology, but also lays the groundwork for how to build positive and healthy relationships with queer youth. So now the next piece is about ability and disability. The piece that always gets me is the part that students with disabilities are suspended 3 times more often than other children. Is always disturbing. I always appreciate this graphic. Is it big enough for folks to read it all? So this begins to kind of talk about the concept of ableism, how our world is set up to really support people who are able-bodied, and that we miss the opportunity to support folks with disability. And then this video is a very lighthearted, fun video that depicts folks with mostly physical and mental disabilities getting ready for the Rio Paralympics a few years ago, but it's a really positive video, and it also, I think, helps people feel a little bit more comfortable about folks with disabilities. So let me play that video for you. All right, here we go. 3 minutes.
Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can. Gee, I'm afraid to go on has turned into, yes, I can. Take a look, what do you see? 133 pounds of confidence, me. Got the feeling I can do anything, yes, I can. Something that sings in my blood is telling me, yes, I can. I was just born today, I can go all the way, yes, I can. 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 Hey, yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can! Are you ready? I can climb Everest. Yes, I can. I can fight here all night and never rest. Yes, I can. I was just born today. I can go all the way. Yes!
Didn't you love that? So
That's really amazing.
I know. It's a very well done video too. Okay, so now you've got people in an upbeat mood, right? So they've watched this video, and then you would break people up into 3 groups to discuss. You assign people to these different scenarios. So I'm just going to show you each of the scenarios. I'll wait long enough for everyone to read it, but it's 3 different scenarios that you would have folks talk about. So here's the first one. So then there are some included discussion questions about how would you respond to Michael? What would you say to the teacher? So just brings up some discussion questions with that piece. Here's the second scenario. So here again, trying to present a realistic situation. What would your response be to Sam? What would your response be to your son? What actions would you take to make sure that Sam was safe? So to open up that conversation. And then the third scenario. So if you're teaching this virtually, you'd have to come up with some creative ways of helping people break up into groups to talk about these scenarios. But hopefully this also gets to a deeper level of understanding and questioning about this. Anything stand out to folks about the scenarios or challenges with presenting those, or ways that might be useful? Or questions? Okay.
I guess it's easy to be reactive, especially with the one where the child's being followed around the museum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a piece of me, if I was that parent, I would be pretty reactive initially and hopefully able to self-regulate. And I would definitely want to call the museum and give them an earful, and definitely want to give the teacher an earful too. But then again, that sounds reactive. So I would want to kind of try to meet them both with a more open-minded discourse. But that would be challenging, especially, well, even the one with Sam too. I mean, they're all challenging. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect example. So someone in the class, that's what they say out loud, right? So then that's a perfect opportunity to engage the co-class. So what's your advice for Cassandra? What should she do? How should she handle this situation? And you can hopefully create a dynamic in the classroom where folks can talk about that.
I think it makes sense now that this information comes during this week where we've kind of gone over caregiver self-regulation. We've gone over responding versus reacting. Like we've taught all these tools to get the parents to a point where they can begin to think about how they may respond in an effective way versus being reactive, even when that's your instinct.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense, like with how you talked about the flow.
Good. And again, grand experiment. Give me feedback once you really teach this about how people respond to these scenarios, if it actually turns into a conversation that's fruitful and productive. That'd be helpful. Okay. So we finished that discussion, and now you're at the end of week 8, and this is a different homework question that we've had in the past. So again, tapping into the joyful aspects of cultural differences. And we don't want to just talk about the hard stuff, but also noticing where there might be some rubs. So people are going to take this home and think about it. So now we move on to week 9. And so week 9, not to skip, this is just an outline of it. So week 9 is the connections and healing one. This is the one where same check-in question, same mindfulness activity. This is the one where we have people write down the things that they're connected to, and then we rip them apart, rip them up and pull them away from them. I'm just curious, those of you who taught this virtually, how did you do this activity virtually?
We did it like MASH style. So it's like pick a number between 1 and 10, and then like that's the number that you cross off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so you do this activity. Here you talk about, and part of the point of that activity is it talks about how children define themselves, who they are, and then we go into a family tale. Remember, the family tale is the story of Joey, Sandy, and John. So the story, same setup, go through the whole story. I should have skipped these slides, but do the same activity. And then we get to what about Jane, right? There's the big reveal. And so here's where we start talking about trauma being intergenerational. So that's a regular part of the curriculum that's already there. We talk about these pieces. And then this is a shift. These are new slides. So we talk about this concept of hurt people hurt people. And then there are 3 concepts to share here, which is all written out in the manual for you: intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, and racial trauma or race-based traumatic stress. So you would share a definition and explain these concepts to folks at this point. Then we shift into showing the ACEs video. This is I'm actually going to show you this video. It's a short video, but just so you can see it ahead of time.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems, and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
So, quick and brief summary of ACEs. And then once you show the video, you do some reinforcing of the learning. So remind folks, so these are the 10 ACEs, but also to broaden that to talk about there are other adverse childhood experiences. These were the ones that were counted in that study, but certainly community violence, homelessness, discrimination, foster care, bullying, repeated medical procedures or life-threatening illnesses, death of a caregiver, loss of a caregiver due to deportation or migration. So all of these different things still are adverse childhood experiences that our children can experience. And that these are some of the outcomes. You know, this can freak people out a little bit, right? Especially if they've been keeping track of their own ACE score. So you're going to have participants that are sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm a 3, I'm a 5, I'm an 8, right? That will be happening to some of the caregivers in the room. So you want to reassure them of a couple of things. One, ACEs are common. People from all walks of life have them. ACEs are not destiny. Just because one individual person has a high ACE score does not mean that these things are true for them. In fact, the knowledge and awareness of what their ACE score is the kind of thing that can get them the help that they need. What's predictable is preventable, right? That it helps people make changes in their own life, reduce child abuse, make societal changes. And this is a way of looking at society as a whole. So then let me say, I think we're almost done with what's in this week. Right, then it's really important to talk about resiliency at this point. So make sure that that is talked about after doing the ACEs and all the things that we've been doing. So it'd be important to end this week on that. And then the rest of the week is typical stuff that was in the week. Yes, so that's the rest of the week. And then week 10, there are no changes. So there you have all the changes in your 10-week curriculum done in less than 2 hours. So, you know, my hope is that you'll all go out and teach this, that you'll report back about things that need to be tweaked or things that work really well, or if anything falls flat. I certainly want to hear about that also. Questions, thoughts, comments?
If groups are able to teach with this new content, remember how we did like that, like how's it going teaching RPCplus virtually, and did like a meeting like this to check in? It would be interesting to do something like that about this material. That I love these additions, and I'm worried that we're going to run out of time in the hour and a half that we have when we do the virtual RPC. Like we felt pretty jam-packed and did extend a class to 2 hours because of that. And we like tried to prioritize what was most important, and all of this is so important. And so I'm just thinking about like what that will look like when we are teaching it virtually with this added information.
So are you thinking it would be helpful to do that before folks teach, or have some folks go through it a couple times once?
Yeah, like just share experiences like after we do it or while we're doing it, like what it's like to include more information.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you and then if I decide to add a half hour to more than one class or just one class? One. So you certainly could decide you want to teach all of your classes for 2 hours. That's a choice that if folks want to make that, I think it's a trade-off. I think caregivers at home with their kids all day, 2 hours can feel like a long time. So that is also something to experiment with. Maybe there are certain classes that you add that extra time to. Do you remember which week it was that you added the extra half hour?
I think it was week 6.
Okay.
Or 7, because we didn't finish everything from week 6. I can't remember now.
Week 6 is tough.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Cassandra.
Can I just ask, for those who taught the class using Zoom, how challenging was it or not? Can you give us some ideas on that? Hiccups, positives?
I actually thought it went really, really well. I did it with Erica and Sarah. And we had a smaller group. We had 7 or 8 caregivers. So I felt like that was like a good number. I almost wouldn't want to go any larger for virtual, just because they were able to like connect and seem like they formed relationships within the group. But the challenges were like that there's so much information, and so sometimes like the activities didn't land as well as they would have in person probably, or we weren't able to do some of the brainstorming things, but we got a little bit more creative with using different platforms like as we went. So but yeah, we had a good turnout and good feedback from it.
What do you mean by different platforms?
Like using the chat feature or opening up a Word document and typing into it and sharing our screen, like if it was like a flip chart piece of paper. We don't use Zoom, so we aren't able to do breakout groups, but that would have been really helpful too.
What about the child's play?
So just so you know this piece, Cassandra, and other folks can answer too, ahead of time, people will see all of the videos of the caregivers with the children, but the playing part is tricky. I know folks have talked about doing some different things. How did you all do it?
I think we ended up giving it mostly as homework, and went over sort of the elements and, you know, the scoring rubrics, but because we couldn't have that sort of same level of practice in the space with participants and observers, we had to sort of like describe it basically and then have folks do that as homework.
I know one of the things that Jennifer and I have talked about, and Christy and Renee, we're going to experiment with this when we teach our classes coming up, is to actually, we could do it, right? We could actually, I could have a pile of toys in front of me and play with the toys, and then different folks could be the caregivers and make observations of me doing that. You could have the two, if you have two instructors doing that play back and forth to role model it. You could email folks ahead of time or tell them ahead of time, please find a handful of Legos before your next class, and we're going to practice it, and you could break people up. So I think there are some ways to do it. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not sure how it will really work, but we are going to experiment with that piece.
I know it would be extremely difficult, you know, and challenging to do it virtually, but there's something to not just practicing at home, right, with kiddos, but to be able to role play. And so, you know, even if I brought my screen down to the table and I was able to have, and if I don't have Legos at home, do I have a pen and paper that I can draw with? You know, there's always something that someone would have in their home that they can pull together. Even if they forgot, and you start the class and say, okay, in the next 5 minutes, you know, look at the slide and grab one of these items for our individual practice. And like Amy said, like breakout rooms would be great, but you know, you could set it up so that Sharon and I would play right now, and then all of you could be observers and provide feedback to us and still learn from observing. I mean, a lot of the research that went into the skills from PCIT and CARE and helping the non-compliant child that went into TIPS saw that the actual kind of the efficacy and the competence of caregivers practicing the skills were increased from observing others, right? So like if I see Monica do a skill, I'm better able to know what that skill is and then do that skill just from watching and observing and noting. So if you can work it in, I know it's a bit of a stretch, I just highly encourage you to do that. And I'm curious and excited to hear how that works for some of you as you continue to move forward with your virtual offerings.
Well, maybe I know that Christy and I and Renee and I are going to be doing some teaching together. Maybe we can videotape ourselves doing that and send it out to folks too. Right. So as we end, I want to make sure we end on time because it's Friday afternoon. Let's just go around and do a quick checkout and answer one or both of these questions. What are some things you still are concerned or have questions about? And what are you feeling hopeful about and wanting to try? It's fine to pass if you need to, but I'll just call on folks. Any lingering concerns and hopes about this? Cassandra, you're first.
I don't have any lingering concerns, and I'm hopeful that Heather and I can figure out the technology and do the Zooming, and I'm excited about picking it up again.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth.
I think my only concern was just the timing. So figuring out like fitting everything in. And yeah, I'm excited to teach it again at NFI. And yeah, it's a great class. I'm excited to add the new stuff in. Thanks for working on it.
Thank you. Erica.
Yeah, I almost want to say ditto. Yeah, time is always the trickiest part of getting through all the material. And yeah, looking forward to sort of doing this again. We talked about how I think we're excited to sort of facilitate like a second time now that we sort of have gone through like the material. So looking forward to sort of seeing what that's like, and especially with this new lens added to the work. So thank you for putting thought into that.
The second time of teaching RPC Plus is way better than the first time. Just want to say. Rachel, how about you?
I think to echo everyone else, still feeling a little concerned on time, especially with adding this new information. And I think it's going to create a lot more conversation, which is excellent. And still having to navigate those time pieces is always a tough balance. And I'm looking forward to, like everyone's saying, start teaching again, having new groups and teaching more people and teaching this content as well. I think it's a really needed and great addition.
Thank you. Heather.
I also want to say thanks for incorporating this new material. I think it's timely. It's great that you've put the effort into this. As you know, Amy, my only worry really right now is how to do this virtually. I'm great with the material. I've been doing this a long time. I don't have great technological skills. I was lucky to read that document that you sent us. So I was lucky to find it and open it up. So Sandra's going to team with me, so that gives me more confidence. So thanks for all your hard work and your support.
Thank you. Monica.
I'm still kind of thinking about my mom that I find challenging, to help her, but I'm hopeful that all the suggestions that that I've heard will help. And I'm also thinking about, could I videotape my grandson playing and you could use that for your thing? Because that would be really great to have a real child playing in a video that you could show, and then, you could demonstrate how to do it, and then the parents could do it too.
Great, thank you. Sarah.
Hi, sorry, my internet is kicking me in and out, but I caught it. I am excited and concerned, I think, for the same thing. These conversations are going to be potentially challenging, but also are so necessary. And so I'm excited to do it. And I think my experience with RPC Plus was that the information was so well presented and walks people into it, holds their hand, but not in a patronizing way. It's just is really, really well done. And I have the same feeling just being walked through this new information too. So I'm really excited and hopeful about that. And thank you so much, Amy, because it's so much work and it looks great.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Christy. Can't hear you. Oh, I think Christy's stuck. Oh, still can't hear you. All right, Christy, we're going to come back to you. We can't hear you, so see if you can figure that out, and I'll come back to you in a second. Prudence.
I am super excited about the additions. I think it's great. I'm excited to get teaching it again. I think my only concern is time. I want the group that teaches with me together to plan on additional time. You can always end early if you don't need the time, but it's better than running out. So that's my biggest concern.
Thank you. Ruth.
Well, and my other two co-facilitators are just commented, I really love teaching this, and I feel like this new information or the added curriculum has been it's definitely needed, and I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm just I think my frustration comes with I like teaching it in person, because not doing so, there's a lot of missing pieces that we can't, that in person, and the ability to make those for families to make connections with one another is really missing this way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's my frustration with all of this. But it is what it is, and it is the way we have to do things now. I'm looking forward to, we're going to start our group in October and looking forward to doing it. But again, I'm just really, I feel bad for this missed opportunity for some of our new families to come on to not have that connection, that in-person connection that happens. So
yeah, definitely. Renee?
Definitely the time is a concern. I'm also concerned about getting a virtual group off and starting and launching it in Springfield. We haven't had a successful one in a year now, so really wanting to get that to happen. And that's kind of where my hopes are. My hopes are that I'm going to do a lot of learning by co-teaching with you, Amy, and I'm going to do my best to launch Springfield and hope that it really does take off.
Great. Christy, it's your second chance. Oh, she's going to type in the chat box. Okay. Jennifer.
Well, I'm not leading an RPCplus class virtually, but I'm so excited that all of you are. And I was sitting here thinking, this is a lot. If I were someone that was planning on, putting these revisions into practice, I would be appreciative and have hopes that once I get Amy's materials, that it makes sense to me, right? Like, which files do I delete from my whatever they're called, my USB zip drive, right? And have the PowerPoint from today, because it's just a lot to kind of keep track of. So that's my only concern, is that it might be overwhelming for some of you to kind of keep track of, is this a new slide? What part of this slide is different than what I've done before? Because sometimes, like, I look to you, Heather, I know you've been doing this for a long time, because I was there a couple of times doing the care component before we even had tips. And so you get kind of in a rhythm of offering it and going through the curriculum. And so I know this is going to be challenging to tweak and shift, but I'm really hopeful and excited to hear through Amy and from all of you what this looks like to implement these changes in your future offerings. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Sharon, you're going to round us out.
Hi. So I also won't be teaching this, but will be teching this. And, I have two concerns. One, I'm just curious about where talking about families that have addiction comes in, because there is also a whole bias and stereotype and judgment about that, and wondering how that fits into a cultural piece. And, my other concern that I hear you all say is the time. And I just want to remind you all that this is it's an infusion, and that Amy did say she took some things out in order to put in these new components, and you'll probably even come up with more ways that you can sort of plug in cultural pieces. And I oversee the trainers for our regular trainers, and I'm developing a guidance for them for the technological pieces, and I'd be happy to share that with your group also, Amy.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I know we're 1 minute over, 2 minutes over now, so if people have to run, go ahead, but this is wonderful. I feel really fortunate to be working with every single one of you. So good luck. Reach out to me. Don't hesitate to ask any questions. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.